In this video, we are going to talk about SPX, some of its recent price action, the important support and resistance areas, and where we can expect the price of SPX to go in the coming days and weeks. So we'll start by looking at the weekly chart, and what we can see right here is that in the last month or so, SPX has been slowly going up from around its all-time low back in March. SPX has been battling with this area of about 25 cents for a while now. This is more or less the all-time low. This is the third time SPX hit this area. The first time was all the way back in March of 2025. This was the absolute lowest point of SPX up to that point. And this was a very significant low, this March to April area in the entire crypto market. So SPX wasn't too different to other altcoins. And then since then, of course, it had a major recovery and it actually hit all-time highs only a few months later in July of 2025. But since then, it has been very consistently just going down, and recently in January of 2026, it hit a new all-time low at around 23 cents, and it has been consolidating without too much significant movement in recent months. And recently, since March, it actually had a few green candles in a row, and it is now all the way up at 35 cents. This is a pretty significant rally, but of course, with SPX being a very small market cap meme coin, it is incredibly volatile, and as you can see here on the chart, is not that significant in the grand scheme of things. We've seen SPX make much larger moves in just a few days in the past, and the volatility of SPX is still relatively low since about January. This is of course with a very strong correlation to Bitcoin, which has also been slowly grinding up recently, but without too much volatility. Bitcoin is currently sitting at about 76k. It has been very slowly going up. It was all the way down at about 60k not too long ago, but still it seems like the volatility in the crypto market in the last couple of months has been relatively low, and the crypto market has been in a counter trend rally recently. Of course, since the all-time high of Bitcoin back in late 2025 at around 125k, Bitcoin has been very sharply going down, and it went all the way down to around 60k in just a few months, and since then, as I said, it rallied all the way up to over 75k. It's looking like we are getting some sort of a relief rally, but it does still seem like we are in a bear market, and this is only a counter trend rally that will eventually lead to another low. I still really doubt that 60k was the low for this cycle, for this bear market for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will likely head lower than that in the long term. And if that does happen, then SPX will likely continue to create new all-time lows following Bitcoin. It is only slightly above its all-time low right now. So if Bitcoin does get another significant leg down, then SPX is very likely to actually head towards new all-time lows. And under around 23 cents, which is the current all-time low, there is really no floor for SPX, and it could drop significantly lower. SPX is still very clearly in a downtrend, still a very sharp one as well. If we draw this trend line from these previous lower highs, we can see that the downtrend did slow down, and potentially we may have started a trend reversal, but it still doesn't seem that likely in my opinion. There could potentially be forming like a double top right here, and if that is the case, then this candle for March would be the neckline of the double bottom, and for that to be confirmed, we would need SPX to close a weekly candle above around 40 cents. If that does happen, that will be a pretty strong sign that SPX will continue rallying further, but even then, there are more resistance areas to look for. The first one would be this one at around 65 cents or so. And again, since Bitcoin is the leader of the crypto market as a whole, and I suspect that we are still in a bear market in the long term, I still doubt that SPX will get very significant rallies, but in the short term, in the coming weeks, it is very possible for SPX to actually get a pretty significant rally. Again, with it being such a small market cap altcoin and it being so volatile, a relatively small move on the chart for SPX could actually be a move of over 50%, maybe even over 100%. So if SPX does close a weekly candle above 40 cents, as I said, it could potentially be some sort of a double bottom right here and lead to a very significant rally. But again, in the long term, I'm still skeptical about SPX, and I still think that most altcoins will not do so well compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum. I don't think that we will get some sort of a sustained altcoin season, because for that to happen, we usually need Bitcoin and Ethereum to first at least approach new all-time highs, and right now both of them are really far away from that. So of course, this is not financial advice whatsoever, but I personally wouldn't bet on many altcoins right now, and I would stay away from being heavy into altcoins. As I've been saying many times on this channel, in recent months, I would still mostly stick to Bitcoin and Ethereum and maybe a tiny bit of some altcoins, but I would be very selective with them, and the structure of SPX does not seem that convincing. It's not the worst. I have definitely seen some much worse structures on other altcoins, and as I said, there is some potential with SPX if it does close a weekly candle above 40 cents, but I think that in the long term it will not do so well, and it will likely continue creating new all-time lows. And right now, for the most part, SPX is still just in consolidation, so as I said, I would avoid it. So yeah guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.